Hi, I'm Gardener Scott. When I'm harvesting my garden, I love to come across these young zucchini. It's sweet, tender, and will be delicious with dinner tonight. But occasionally, I stumble across one of these monsters that somehow got overlooked. And now the question becomes, what do I do with this? Well, I have an answer. Join me as I make zucchini bread. So I'm back in the kitchen, ready to turn this behemoth into some delicious zucchini bread. So why do I say a monster like this is best for bread? Well, a smaller zucchini is tender. It's sweeter. The seeds are much smaller. So it's perfect for cutting into salads or roasting or grilling. But the big ones start to get pretty dense and can be a little fibrous. And the seeds really start developing into the kind of thing that becomes a nuisance when you try to eat it. So I'll take this, use the flesh, which still has enough sweetness, especially with added sugar, and make it into zucchini bread. A zucchini this size can easily make a couple loads. And I'll begin by cutting off the stem end and cutting off the base. And I'll just trim it down, removing the seeds. I'm not a big fan of seeds in my bread, and this is big enough that I don't need to use that inner part of the zucchini. I'll work with 3 manageable chunks. So there's 1. There's 2, and there's 3. And now I'll trim the zucchini, removing those inner hard enlarged seeds, and focus on saving the flesh around the outside. Keeping the skin is perfectly fine for zucchini bread. It adds color, it adds some texture, and there's actually some vitamins in there too. I'll make 4 cuts in each of these chunks to get the flesh that I'm looking for on the outside. And then the inner piece that's loaded with the seeds that I don't need, I'll just set aside. I'll also cut the pieces into spears, and there might be a few seeds left behind, so I can also trim these spears to make sure those larger pieces of seeds have been removed. I've cut the zucchini into smaller pieces, removed all the seed sections, and now all of this part is ready to go put into the compost bin. And now I'm ready to grate the zucchini. This recipe calls for 2 cups of grated zucchini, and I'll have a lot left over. Depending on how energetic I feel, I can use a box grater to begin grating the zucchini. This takes a little more effort. It's a little messier with your fingers, but it's definitely an easy, efficient way of grating the zucchini. The box grater works fine, and I usually use it all by itself if I'm just making one batch of bread. But this zucchini will probably give me enough for 2 batches. So to make the process a little easier, I'll go ahead and use my food processor. And I have the attachment for grating already set up. So I'll just start it and then feed these spears into it, and I'll have grated zucchini in no time. The zucchini's all grated, and now it's time to measure it. While the food processor is faster, I find that sometimes it has trouble shredding the skin, and occasionally there's large chunks left behind. So I'll set these aside, and I'll measure out just the shredded flesh, along with some of the smaller pieces of skin. If I come across any other big chunks, I just set them to the side. In a large bowl, I put together the wet ingredients. I've got 2 1/4 cups of sugar to start in the bowl, and to that I add 1 cup of oil. And the oil really doesn't matter. I'm using canola oil. Vegetable oil is fine. Then I'll add 3 eggs, and using both the yolk and the white. Of course, keeping my hands clean along the way. And then to this, I'll add 3 teaspoons of vanilla extract. With the sugar, the oil, the eggs, and the vanilla all in the same bowl, now we want to whisk them together. I like using a fork. A whisk works perfectly well. You want to break apart the eggs, blend in the oil, incorporate it all with the sugar, and keep stirring and whisking until well blended. Now, you can definitely use a mixer for this. I don't like my bread to be over mixed, so I do it by hand. But you can use a stand mixer, a hand mixer, whatever you prefer at this point. You just need to make sure that the liquid piece is well blended with the sugar. In a separate bowl, I put the flour, the cinnamon, the salt, and the baking soda. And a teaspoon of baking powder. And of course, the secret ingredient that I think makes this zucchini bread extra special is the fresh grated nutmeg. With the dry ingredients all in the bowl, I'll mix them up just so it's pretty evenly distributed with all those dry ingredients. And now I'm ready to add the dry to the wet. I'll pour in about half of the dry ingredients at this point. And then I'll just stir with a spoon. Now, again, you can use a mixer for this, but I just like doing it by hand. And you just stir, getting all the dry ingredients off the side until it's all mixed and blended together. And it's pretty well blended, so now I'll add the other half of the dry ingredients and continue the same process, stirring, wiping down the sides with the spoon until it's all blended together. It will be a relatively thick dough at this point, but that's okay, because the next step will add some more moisture and make the dough much more manageable. And now that it's mixed well, but not over beaten, we add the most important ingredient, the shredded zucchini. I like using a spoon, especially for this phase, because I like to have those shredded pieces of zucchini well incorporated. And I don't like them torn apart, as might happen if you use a mixer. But that's just my personal preference. This final step is optional. I like nuts in my zucchini bread, so I have about a cup of chopped walnuts, and I'll add them at this time. If you don't like nuts, or you don't like nuts in your zucchini bread, you can definitely leave this step out. And now it's all blended. It's mixed well, and I'm ready to pour into loaf pans. I sprayed 2 loaf pans, and now I'll pour this wonderful batter into the pans, half in the first pan and half in the second. The oven is preheated to 325 degrees. So now it's time to put these pans on the center rack, and they'll cook for about 50 to 55 minutes. With the bread in the oven, I've had the chance to measure out the remaining zucchini that I shredded, and it happens to be exactly a total of 6 cups. So I can make another 2 loaves with the zucchini in this bowl, an additional 2 loaves with the zucchini in this bowl, so that one monster zucchini produced enough for 6 loaves of zucchini bread. And that's after trimming out all of the seeds. What I'm actually going to do, however, is to freeze this zucchini, because it'll take me a little while to eat 2 full loaves. So I'll take this out of the freezer in the months ahead and have wonderful zucchini bread during the winter. The bread is ready, and now it's time to take it out of the oven. I'll place the pans on a cooling rack. And let them rest for about 15 to 20 minutes before I remove the bread. The pans have cooled to the touch. They're still pretty warm, but I'll just turn them upside down. A little shake, and it should come right out. Now I'll just let these cool for a few more minutes and then flip them back the other way. I've already bagged up the other shredded zucchini and put it in the freezer. Another great option is to actually make the bread and then freeze the loaves. It freezes pretty well, and that's probably what I'll do with one of these. I'll freeze it and then eat the other one fresh over the next couple days. A monster zucchini, and it's going to give me 6 delicious loaves of zucchini bread. If you're not growing your own, I'm sure there's a gardener in your area that's dying to get rid of their zucchini that's piling up. There you have it, how I make zucchini bread. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know below. If you haven't subscribed to the Gardener Scott channel, you can do so now. And if you like the video, you can give me a thumbs up and share it. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening and making zucchini bread.